Hey everyone, what's going on? It's BRAP. It's another Wednesday night here, and got a lot to talk about. A lot of gaming news to talk about. More Activision related updates as relates to Microsoft's back and forth with the CMA. We'll talk a little bit more about that because there is some breaking news there, and then we'll also discuss some big Silent Hill news. Finally, we've got to see a trailer of what many of us, and we talked about this on BRAP, I want to say about a year ago, about a Silent Hill remake in the works. And so we got to see that. And then also some Netflix-related news. It looks like Netflix is seriously exploring cloud gaming, but not as a console replacement. So that's a very interesting point. So we'll talk about those things. But and then look, Modern Warfare 2 campaign. We'll talk about that as well. That for those who pre-ordered the $99 edition, I forget what it's called, you get early access to the game single player campaign starting tomorrow. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But and then of course we'll be joined by hold on just a sec here. We'll be joined by the other panel members of the BRAP podcast. But I want to introduce Hamp. We got Hamp back here. Hamp, good evening, and how are you doing today, sir?
I'm all right. I'm good.
Awesome, man. Sorry, I was taking a drink. So Hamp, look, I just there's been a lot of. Well, first of all, let me big shout out to everyone in the live chat. I forgot to welcome everyone to the live chat. Great to see everyone here. See the familiar faces that join us every Wednesday night. Please do me a favor. I'm going to drop a link here in the live chat. Please share the link out to or on your favorite social media platform. But Hamp, I've been thinking a lot recently about PC gaming. And I did a BRAP rant on this topic yesterday, and Forte hopped in for a little bit, and so did Nate. And I was thinking, it's nice to. Well, I should say it's nice. It's PC just is the best gaming platform in my opinion. And I say that because Gotham Knights, which is releasing, I think in 2 more days, or is it tomorrow? I don't remember. Tomorrow, Friday. That game was mentioned to be running at 30 FPS, and then there's a Plague Tale Requiem on consoles, which is also running at 30 FPS. And I thought to myself, Hamp, this is why I game on PC. I like the flexibility, the ability to scale things, performance the way I see fit. And as Brian Baker would say, PC is always the way to go. Hamp, I'm becoming a PC fanboy, man. And some of that elite PC attitude is starting to seep into my mindset. Is that a problem, Hamp?
You gotta learn to control it, man. That's all. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just you gotta learn to temper it, I think.
I mean, but I'm out there saying, console gaming is the malt liquor of gaming, and PC's the, we're out here drinking, $100 bottles of champagne, smoking cigars, and console gamers are drinking 40 ounces of St. Ides and smoking Newports.
It's a thing. There's a difference, but like I told one of my kids, that on your sleeve and wave a flag about it, and and put it in front of everybody's face all the time.
Yeah, that's a great lesson to teach. By the way, I should probably incorporate that lesson into my own life.
However, I would say I think I posted something on Twitter a couple of weeks ago about the Kissinger doctrine, and what I said, and I drew allusions to a lot of other common terms which are not necessarily part of the Kissinger doctrine, but it's in that direction. And I talked about the notion of commensurate response, and I think my recommendation is you kind of temper it and tamp that down, and not necessarily throw it in everyone's face all the time. However, when pushed into a corner, I think you're fully authorized to come out swinging, right? And I won't say it the way I was planning on saying it. Just dangle that thing in front of people's face, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. No, I hear you. But, so this, there's a lot of back and forth about 30 FPS and Forte brought up a very, I thought was a very good point about that maybe there was some expectation, I think, by the gaming community, and I don't know where this expectation came from. I don't recall Sony or Microsoft saying, hey, with these new consoles, 60 FPS is going to be the standard frames. Now, look, I'm not going to say that I prefer 30 over 60. I game on PC. I would prefer 60. I'm playing a Plague's Tale Requiem right now, which I just downloaded on Xbox GamePass PC. Look, I'm running it on ultra settings. Of course, I have DLSS balanced enabled, and I'm getting, I'd say anywhere from 85 to 90 frames per second at ultra settings. And, it's great. And I love that having that flexibility and the ability to scale the game or scale games, I should say, the way I see fit, to kind of get the performance I want out of a game. And I love that flexibility PC. But to Forte's point, he's like, 60 should be the standard. And, I don't know if that's, I said to him, I said, I think for developers, especially AAA games, in my opinion, I think that developers would, people want the shiny new things, right? They want the graphics that make your eyes bleed. They want all that stuff, and I don't know if they can do all that, with ray tracing and all the bells and whistles, and give you 60 FPS. Now, part of the argument that Forte brought up too, I wish he was here to talk about this a little bit more, was he said, hey, should be an option then. There should be a performance mode or a graphical mode, similar to what Sony's done with some of their first party. But I did see some dialogue too about 30 FPS being acceptable. It's terrible for a game, and I don't necessarily agree that 30 FPS necessarily makes a game bad either. I don't believe that. I've played Horizon Forbidden West on the graphical setting at 30 FPS, and I enjoyed it. I didn't feel like it broke the game. And you and I talked about this too, Hamp, where games are sum of its parts, or a game is a sum of its parts. And so, it could be 30 FPS, but it could do other things very well, like, graphics, more complex AI, things like that. So, but what do you think, Hamp? Like, because one thing that stood out was this idea that, with these consoles, that we were going to get better frames because the consoles are more powerful than the previous generation, and that maybe 60 FPS should be the standard. But is that even realistic to even think that should be a standard? Because I would imagine that, just given how large some of these games are and how graphically intensive, even with the hardware that we have, that may not be realistic to have 60 FPS, or maybe even an option of a performance or graphical mode with every game at least. So what are your thoughts, Hamp?
I mean, my personal thoughts are, as one would expect, are skewed from probably what the norm is amongst the gaming community. Part of the problem is the way that that a lot of the gaming community views things in terms of absolutes, right? And so, 60 frames being the standard, that's fine as a standard, but it's not a rule, right? Even when you have standards, you have exceptions. And so, kind of like you and I talked about, my personal view as a consumer is a game as a sum of all of its parts. When I'm playing my favorite video games, I'm typically not running my GeForce frame rate counter, right? When I'm playing Max Payne, right, or some other title that's my favorite, so where Gotham Knights lines up is it's going to line up based on how that overall package lands, and whether or not that 30 frames per second is actually a difference or impactful. it may not be. And so, as I'm always likely to say, for any game that's in pre-release that hasn't actually launched yet, a lot of the drama and speculation and conjecture about what is indicated by, a 30-second trailer that somebody's seen, or hell, I don't even really care, 5 minutes of gameplay, right? The fact of the matter is that you're viewing that through a tainted lens. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's how the game translates when it's sitting on the screen in front of you. And the only way anybody's going to know is when the thing is out in the wild and somebody's actively actually using it. So all of this information is all about, right, speculation about what the game's going to be like before it comes out, and I just don't find that particularly interesting. From my perspective as somebody who works in software development, I unfortunately come from a school of thought that is oriented around a scale that doesn't make me overly concerned about the 30 frames per second, right? I went to school learning about like the greatest software disasters of all of our time. Things like the Mariner 1 spacecraft, and I can't remember the name of the I think it was an X-ray machine or a chemotherapy machine that actually irradiated people, right, and gave them cancer. I come from learning about things like how a U.S. warship shot down the Iranian Airbus, and things of that nature. So I come from a domain where I think about like big software catastrophes and big disasters, and so the fact that something's 30 frames per second in 2022 really isn't that big a deal to me. When the game lands, we'll see how it is, and then I'll make a determination whether or not the 30 frames per second actually means anything or not.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I saw a lot of people were kind of running, to drawing conclusions that this 30 FPS was going to make the game bad. It's like, well, no one can say that because no one's played it yet. Like, you don't know if that 30 FPS is going to be impactful to the overall experience. And I would argue most people who don't know any better, who are not on Twitter, the average Joe Schmo who doesn't interact on gaming Twitter is going to go out and buy this game and probably enjoy it. Unless there's go ahead, man.
What's hilarious, right, on the drive back from swim practice tonight, I was actually playing back my own podcast from Sunday night, and my oldest asked, what do people mean when they talk about frames per second? And we started talking about hertz, and we started talking about kind of how images are conveyed to you on a screen, and how they aren't necessarily actually in motion, right? But it's the speed at which they transition, and you kind of flip through the pages at 60 events per second, right, conveying the perception of motion. And we kind of had a lengthy conversation about that. And then, of course, as you would think, she got to the question of, can you tell the difference? And I started explaining, well, under these certain scenarios, I could tell the difference, right? And then she said, well, what about this thing? And I said, yeah. So at a certain point, right, the average human being's visual acuity doesn't really allow them to tell the difference. They can at a high level, kind of subjectively, have a general feel that the motion is smoother. Like I can see it, when I'm playing a racing game, when I have a vehicle in a turn, I can tell that my ability to tie where the car is drifting to my own inputs, that allows for higher reaction speed because I have a better perception of how the car is moving, through that curvature of motion. I said, but frame by frame, like no, like, and even at 30 to 60, right? One of the things I mentioned to her was, that isn't necessarily a scenario, depending on the type of game or depending on the type of thing that I'm viewing. I can't necessarily tell, not versus when I'm looking at, say, a 4K monitor that's at 30 frames per second and I'm actually drawing my mouse cursor across the screen. Then I can actually like perceptibly tell, right, the instances of kind of the mouse jump. But in other scenarios, what I said was I can't necessarily tell frame by frame, but there is something, and we kind of talk about this as kind of a, subconscious, not necessarily subconscious, but, a spectrum of perception that isn't necessarily right eyesight at a frame by frame kind of level of perceptibility, but just like the generic feeling that something's wrong or that something's not right, and that will often cause me to go dig into settings and find out that something's not correct, which is the same kind of thing you get when anything kind of comes into your vision that's something you're not accustomed to seeing, right? Your mind kind of takes several seconds to kind of get a grasp on it, or there's also kind of a certain way of how vertigo occurs, which is an interesting discussion because you have a lot of people in the aviation community who just believe that vertigo is a myth, right? So things of that nature, right, feed into how much people can actually tell the difference, and like you said, right, whether it's impactful, right, also kind of is a lot of what goes on with VR. And I think one of the stories you and I talked about, maybe we talked about the Microsoft contract for HoloLens with the Army, which is like a $22 or $23 billion contract, and how soldiers aren't responding well to that at very high percentages. And that has a lot to do with the things that I've talked about on the show before, which is that, there are certain things that are innate to how humans perceive things and how we observe things and the way your eyes work. That means, VR isn't going to work that well for some people, but also, again, just to tie it back to, all of that is associated around the way different people perceive things. And so again, 30 frames per second isn't necessarily impactful. And for some people, it's only going to be impactful because at some point somebody started talking about the difference between 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second, which, you go back a few years ago, that wouldn't have bothered anyone, right? Until somebody called it out and said, made you aware and conscious that there was a difference between the two.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. Like, I think mass market probably not going to even be an issue, not going to even notice it or even think about it. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of games too. But I just, it just, I guess what's unfortunate is kind of, and I saw your tweet about, kind of people running with their, running to grab their pitchforks and
you're saying it a lot more politely than actually.
Yeah, no, I know. I saw, you were kind of like, people being dumbasses, and I don't know if you said dumb. Maybe you did say dumb. I don't know. I don't remember now. But
this is an instance where I use that term. Yeah, because
okay.
Yeah, because I mean, and this is the topic, right? And before I mention that, just to tie it back to my point about the difference in software development was to say, and this is like oriented around like this team, right? Things in software development go bad, right? They go bad at different times by different project teams. Sometimes they go bad in ways that happen very, very late and close to the end of development. I feel pretty certain that team was trying to get 60 frames per second out, right? They were able to do it on PC, right? And if you look at the PC minimum and required and recommended specifications, they are I don't know that I would say that they're hefty, but they don't track along with, say, the Steam metrics, right? Or what those Steam metrics would cause you to believe about what the common person is running for a PC. They are, the recommended specs are pretty much in sync with like the lowest spec box, right, in my studio. And typically, right, my gaming PCs that I put together, I typically try and keep kind of above water with that regard. So, I think that my feeling is that team was working at that, but they didn't hit it. And at some point they had to make a call that, again, because of design trade-offs, they were going to go with 30 frames per second. I went back and forth with a few people on Twitter who disagreed. I think maybe even some co-hosts on this show disagree, and I'm like, but at the end of the day, any piece of software development that has any type of performance requirements, right? Maintaining your KPIs is always going to come down to a matter of trade-offs. And some days you're lucky and you don't have to make sacrifices, but a lot of times you are, and those are choices that just have to be made. This team, obviously a choice could have been to delay the game and keep pushing for that additional performance. So this is a team that made the decision to go ahead and release. Now, I say the team, right? But again, what we always have to keep in mind, what people love to forget, is that the development team they're the people writing code, right? But that development team reports to people who are responsible for revenue, right, and profit. So along that way, the team could have had their input, but somebody who is in charge of money, right, is the one who gets to make the final call. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And to kind of transition to kind of what I said earlier, like when people heard about 30 FPS, the pitchforks came out that the very emotional takes, as I call it, were happening, and that kind of spilled over also to this story about the original voice actor for Bayonetta, who called for the boycott of Bayonetta over a pay dispute. I saw people, and this is crazy. Look, I'm not saying you can't, this was the voice actor, her name is Helena Taylor. She actually called for the boycott, put out a video. And look, and I get when I saw the video, I was like, oh, that sucks. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe hey, people should get paid with market value. Look, there's a difference between market value and paying someone what they actually think they're worth. Because I think you and I talked about this, Hamp, too. Like, people sometimes have an inflated sense of worth as it relates to their work. I tend to see that at times, given the line of work that I do. It's like, no, you may think because you did this for 2 years that you should be paid at someone who's done the work for 6 years. That's just not how that works. But what was interesting about this is, one, a couple of things kind of stood out to me about her. And again, I'm going to put my TA hat here, Hamp. Her putting out a video like that and telling people to boycott, like as a professional, like I'm looking at this like as someone who's a professional, and they're basically going out and telling consumers not to buy something because they feel like they were wrong, putting it out on social media. It's like, do you want to voice act in the video game industry anymore? Because you are burning bridges here. That, to me, red flags, number one, right? Now, I think the other thing that so basically what she was saying is that they offered her a flat fee of $4,000 to work on the game, and that she wanted a higher payment, and so that was kind of her her displeasure, what she was voicing. Hey, you know what? And I think Capono 5150 said I believe she broke NDA. He says she may have broke NDA, which, if she did, even more of a red flag, right? As a, someone putting out their video and kind of throwing a former employer under the bus. Like, you just don't do those things, right? Like, especially if you want to, I think, work in the industry, you just don't burn bridges like that. But and that was a red flag for me. But what was interesting is that, and while I was kind of like it's part of me was like, hey, you know what? That if this is true, this sucks. I wasn't going and making videos saying, Hamp, I'm boycotting Bayonetta. Like, and I think this is kind of a symptomatic problem, an issue that I'm seeing with social media, that I'm seeing with content creators, where they just run and hit the record button, and it's like, oh my God, they're not paying her they're only paying her $4,000, and I'm going to boycott the game. It's like, well, you don't even know the whole story. You're hearing her side of the story, but there's probably another side of the story as well. And again, this is kind of a reoccurring thing that we see, Hamp. We see it with the Activision CMA thing. Again, I can't tell you how many times I've talked about how the CMA works. I think we talked about this. Was it last week? I think it was last week. We talked about the. I used the Amazon investigation as an example by the CMA and the verbiage there. But again, people are running and crying foul and grabbing their pitchforks, and they're not really, and they're doing that based on a small bit of a morsel of information, which you mentioned in your tweet. And this was the most recent case of this, where I saw somebody mention a specific YouTuber, but there was also other YouTubers that were calling out for the boycotting of this game. And I saw people on Twitter saying they were going to boycott this game. And then we come to find out, Hamp, this probably won't surprise you, right? Then we find out that sources familiar to this story or in Platinum Games, and I forget his name now. The guy from Bloomberg. Why am I forgetting his name?
Because it need
Jason
not be mentioned, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I know you're not a big fan.
Regardless of his one instance of doing good work.
Yeah. So, all right. So here's the thing. So this Bloomberg article had a report that disputed some of the claims made by Helena Taylor. And what these sources are saying to Bloomberg, and Bloomberg saying they reviewed documentation to confirm some of this stuff, that in fact Platinum planned to rehire her for Bayonetta 3 for at least 5 sessions of work lasting 4 hours each, which each paying between $3,000 to $4,000. Okay, so that would be around $15,000 for the work. So that's not the flat rate that she claimed of $4,000. Now, the Bloomberg report's also saying that Taylor asked for a 6-figure sum, as well as some residuals from the game as well for doing the voice acting work. So, and I think we ask? I think we did. Did you ask? Was it Ramon? I forget his name now.
Yeah, I didn't ask him, but I think EJ had I suggested, we ask Ramon because he is a voice actor, right, and should be able to at least, if he can't speak to it directly, at least provide kind of some data points of interest, which would help us kind of just orient ourselves as to the, veracity of the claims. And yeah, I mean, and what EJ came back with from that discussion was, the $4,000 figure was not necessarily a completely wild, thing that might be offered. That it typically scales based on the experience of the voice actor, but it also depends upon the need or the demand for that voice actor on a particular property, right? And so, it appears to me at least that there was, some misrepresentation, whether or not that be intentional or just because of the brevity of Twitter, or sometimes I get bamboozled a little bit when I'm on camera, whatever. That there was an inaccurate representation potentially of the exact contractual situation, but it's also not outside the bounds that. That Platinum just kind of either wanted a different actress or wasn't, or was ambivalent to whether or not they went after a different actress. Maybe had another one waiting in the wings, if this one didn't work out. And generally, I guess my feeling is, although there are cases sometimes of where strange things happen, like seemingly for no reason. Generally, if a person's not kind of wanted around a particular situation, there's usually a reason for that, and that reason might exist on both sides, right? I'm not putting that all on the voice actress, but it would seem unusual to me that there wasn't some source of friction or animosity that kind of played into it, as well. So, but at the end of the day, right, I guess my other feeling about this, and this isn't, I mean, I guess this is a little, lacking in empathy, but I mean, it's show business. And, I've never thought of show business as being an altruistic endeavor that is not a cutthroat kind of environment. And I again, kind of like we've talked about before, about how, we apply kind of these lofty ideals of ethics and honor that I don't really think have the place in how, these various the entertainment industry works. So
I guess
there we are.
Yeah, I guess for me the red flag is coming out and kind of throwing your previous employer under the bus. Like, especially if you want to be employed within in an industry, and especially if you've broken NDAs, like those are red flags. Like you may have sabotaged your career. That's a red flag for me. But again, I mean, like you said, Hamp, there could be some other things there where it maybe there was something disagreement between both parties, and this is kind of how it played out too. But I guess more so what I didn't agree with was kind of the reaction by the community of let's boycott this game, and let's and a couple not a couple but quite a few influencers that I saw go out and make videos like, hey, look, boycott this game with only a morsel of information and not having the entire story, and then have this article by Bloomberg break. It's like, come on, like let's not jump to these conclusions. Let's not whip out the jump to conclusions, Matt. But unfortunately, that's what people seem to do, man. It's it's I don't know, Hamp. It's annoying, man.
Yeah. And, the thing that sprung to mind was, I can't remember which TV show this was, but I've had occasion to go back and look at some of the kind of, most historic kind of strange TV cancellations that have happened in history. And I want to say it may have been Firefly. It may have been some other one, because although Joss Whedon has gotten quite a tarnished reputation in more recent years, back in the day, I loved his shows and whatnot. And I think it was Firefly, but it may have been some other show. But one show was canceled simply because the showrunners had heard a rumor that the network was planning on canceling the show, and the network heard a rumor that the showrunners were just unhappy and were planning on packing up. It was nothing but conjecture and rumor on both sides, and the show wound up being canceled simply because neither side ever came to a table to talk about renewing the show for another season. And so, the way this whole thing has gone down has just kind of occurred to me as a matter of, maybe people who didn't talk and weren't transparent and open and direct with each other. But certainly what's clear is there were definitely, if not outright misunderstandings, just definitely, wildly different perceptions of kind of how the episode kind of evolved. And again, that's another reason for not, running off to Twitter, doing your hot take, posting your video with a lemon face thumbnail, and, playing your Pied Piper and Fiddler on the Roof and trying to get everybody to march to a tune based on uncorroborated information.
Exactly. Yeah. No, actually, that's a great point. And again, that's kind of been my frustration with just not all content creators, but quite a few out there, and that do this kind of stuff, and it's just I don't think it leads to any good or healthy dialogue, to be honest with you. And we're seeing this unfortunately with the Activision CMA stuff. Which I think, Hamp, I'm gonna try to do a rant about that maybe sometime this weekend about an article that was out there. I'm not gonna mention the article, but there's an article that oh boy, yeah. Hopefully we get to rant about that this weekend. But anyhow, so that's that story with Banana. And by the way, according to the Bloomberg article, Platinum also. According to this, there's the sources that spoke to Bloomberg that she was even offered a cameo appearance at $4,000. So who knows? We'll see. But I don't know if we'll hear any more about the story. But she is still sticking by her story. She said that what's been reported from the other side is not true. It's a joke, and she stands by her videos. So we'll see. Well,
and here's my thing, and here's what the whole first half hour or so of the show has been about, right? It's kind of like I keep going back to, right, and I lean on Ted Lasso. I didn't actually read the Walt Whitman quote, but the Ted Lasso quote about be curious, not judgmental, right? Like this is about simply the race to be judgmental about a thing where you don't have all the information and you don't have all the facts, and I just find that very weird. And again, just kind of reflect on the decades, that I don't know. I don't know. I've just always found it more interesting to, dig into the meat of the material and read. I was kind of even thinking as we came into the show tonight, and you and I have talked back and forth throughout the week about several articles, right, that we've read that are just articles that are not kind of in the general, gamer centric kind of windshield, right? But they definitely expand, I guess, our view of kind of a lot of the things going on. And I'm like, I guess my general feeling is most podcasts do their prep work by spending a lot of time in spaces on Twitter versus, spending a lot of time reading, not only gaming material, but a lot of material about the tech industry and the corporations and things of that nature. And I just feel like, the discussions and the conversation would overall be better served by, everyone involved being more informed and kind of kicking around questions, right, rather than kicking around judgments.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, and that's kind of where, and I've said this on BRAP, I feel like the last couple of weeks, like, the purpose of this show is to offer a more thought out perspective than some of the other shows that are out there. Where, like, I literally will listen to shows, like I heard a show this week, and it was like, the topic was, is there collusion with the corruption with the CMA? And I'm like, what? Like, I don't know how anyone would even arrive to that topic. Like, and that's the kind of stuff that it doesn't lead to any good dialogue. It doesn't lead to anything positive, in my opinion. It just drives false narratives. It fuels console war bullshit. And I don't think it does anything for the listeners. I mean, I think, like, if you're going to be a content creator, I think the value proposition is having good dialogue and providing a different perspective, and doing some homework into the subject matter you're discussing, so that you're not putting out misinformation, disinformation, or you're not, having, look, I'm not a big fan of Tucker Carlson, and I try to shy away from that kind of conversation because it doesn't do anything but prey on the ignorant, number one, and two, push a lot of misinformation, disinformation out there. And I just don't want to be associated with that kind of shit. So, but yeah, I mean, like, I see this a lot happen, and look, and even if we get it wrong sometimes, like, I'm okay. Like, if we get it wrong, hey, let us know too. And, like, if obviously do so in a polite manner. But anyhow, that's my mini rant for the evening. So Hamp, you shared something with me that, and I didn't get a chance to read this article, but it looks like Netflix is opening a fifth gaming studio, and it sounds like they're seriously exploring cloud gaming. And their VP Mike Verdu says the company has 55 titles in the work. Actually, their fifth internal studio is actually led by former Overwatch executive producer Chaco Sony. I've never actually heard of that individual, but he was used to be led Overwatch. And but tell me a little bit more about this, because again, I didn't get an opportunity to read the entire article, Hamp. But yeah, what was your takeaway from the article you read about Netflix looking at looking into cloud gaming and having these titles in development?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't extrapolate, a moonshot out of this. All of this seems like a very kind of natural evolution for Netflix. Obviously, their challenge is kind of one that's oriented around the innovator's dilemma, right? They have, they arrived on the scene as kind of a DVD service, and then they pivoted into live streaming, and now, both from a technology perspective and from a business model perspective, have become, one of the more innovative kind of entertainment and service companies, right, to have come about recently. As kind of their model has kind of turned the entire video entertainment industry on its head. But now they're approaching, what we've talked about with the gaming industry writ large, and maybe Microsoft specifically, where, they've they've addressed a good chunk of the people that are addressable, right? And so now it's, how do we figure out what the other revenue streams are, right, to continue to drive growth? And so they've hit on this video gaming thing, and we actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago on Enough to Keep Going. And one of my comments was, the video game thing doesn't really need to hit that big, right? It's really about curating some IP and story base, to kind of contribute to their ability to kind of capitalize on shows, and create new IP and create those types of things that people want to tune into Netflix for, right? It's the equivalent of the killer app on a gaming platform. They kind of need killer TV shows to keep people subscribed and to kind of reduce the amount of subscriber churn that they go through. And so this seems to be an expansion on that, whereas a couple of weeks ago, like I said, I didn't feel like the video game thing needed to be that big, but now, they are talking about, like I said, adding an additional studio, this one in Finland. But in addition to that, they apparently have 55 new mobile games in development. So sounds a little bit like Embracer, but it's specifically for the mobile industry. And so I don't know that number particularly concerns me in terms of scale. And a mobile game can be anything in a spectrum of something that one person can put together to something that a fairly small team can put together. So, with only 5 studios, having 55 mobile games actively in production may not be that much of a stretch. But then this other thing that they mentioned is wanting to start their own cloud gaming service. And this sounds a little bit kind of Microsoft-ish, right? Where when Microsoft talks about gaming and kind of unbuckling it from the notion of the piece of hardware, right? Kind of the historic legacy model, the thing that sits on your desk or in your entertainment center. Netflix is kind of saying the same thing. Look, our viewers, just like Microsoft says, their customers are lots of different places on lots of different types of devices, and Microsoft wants to skate to where their customers are, and meet them where they are, rather than kind of the old Microsoft model of telling them, come over here and do all of your stuff on x86, desktop PCs. Netflix is kind of saying the same thing. Their quote from this article over on basicthinking.com, we are looking very seriously at a cloud gaming offering so we can reach our members on TVs and PCs. We will approach this the same way we did mobile, which is to start small, be humble, be thoughtful, and then expand. So this is Netflix, trying to get to where their customers are, and where their customers might want to play games, that there's a certain amount of addressable market that is playing games on mobile, but there's an additional market segment that may want to play games on TVs and PCs, and that makes cloud game streaming a technology that is an option. So they say it's a move we think we should make to pick up members where they are on the devices they consume Netflix on. And so, whereas their mobile gaming offerings, on iOS and Android are not necessarily through the Netflix app, but are available in their stores, with them, just kind of playing the role as a publisher. This is probably going to be something with more tighter integration of the Netflix app, or actually a change in what the Netflix app does. And so if you kind of think of an app that is, Netflix, as well as kind of like a Stadia, then that might kind of be where they're heading. And that could be fairly interesting, right? That, if you have the Netflix app installed on your phone, or the Netflix app on a TV, that can enable you to both view content, right, from a TV show perspective, as well as play games. I don't necessarily know that I would want to see all that in the same pane of glass, that I might want, some separation between those two catalogs, that I might want that available in a different tab or shifted into a different mode. I don't necessarily know that when I'm sitting down to watch TV, particularly if I'm sitting down to watch TV, with a group, that I want, eyeballs on, what I'm playing game wise. That's a thing that, like, in my household, and I don't know how everybody else deals with it, but like I'm sensitive to, why I don't have my NVIDIA Shield right out in a public space for everybody. I'm signed into that on my Google account, right? And so I don't want everyone to have access to my calendar, my email, yada yada yada. Same thing why, you know, my Google Nest, right? Mesh pucks that are distributed around the house. I don't have like my personal app information enabled on those, right? So things that are outside my control, right, of my studio, my office, right? People can't go to them to ask, what's on my calendar. So that might be a thing just in terms of kind of how Netflix wants to manage that and its deployment. To show some sensitivity to power users who are kind of going to be their early adopters. But it's all interesting to see kind of where they're going to go with it.
Yeah, and one of the things that the VP of Gaming for Netflix said, about their gaming service, he's referring to it as a value add. He's like, we're not asking you to subscribe as a console replacement. It's a completely different business model. The hope is over time that it just becomes this very natural way to play games wherever you are. So I thought that was kind of interesting, especially in light of Stadia, and Google announcing that that they'll be shutting down that service January of next year. So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. I was thinking about this. Like, is this something that I would try? I don't know. I think it just depends what games are there. They have acquired. They acquired Night School Studios, which is developed behind Oxenfree. I think that's Oxenfree. So when they made that acquisition back in 2021, I kind of raised an eyebrow for me. I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like, I'm just wondering. They're also partnering with Ubisoft to produce like 3 mobile games. So it's going to be interesting to see how, or the kind of game that they offer on that platform. So we'll see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think the other dynamic we'll play into this is, as you and I have talked about also, is baseline shift syndrome, right? The notion that a lot of us, our co-hosts, other gamers of this generation who are co-hosts on other podcasts will view and talk about this as a nothing burger and something that people don't want. But what they fail to recognize when they say that, right, is the fact that for a lot of people, again, we grew up identifying with ABC, NBC, right, later Fox, the WB, the CW, right. But a lot of people growing up today identify with Netflix as a very core-centric content service of their lives, right? And as those people also grow to think about gaming, right, this may be a very natural convergence for them in a way that doesn't appear to be so for us. And it becomes very native, right, to when you think about it as a platform, where I used to love coming home from work, getting into my game room and turning on my 360, right? And immediately, going to, gaming, viewing movies, communicating with my friends, whatever. It is equally naturally, and could become more so, right, very native for somebody to come home from work, sit down in front of their TV, pull up Netflix, right, and for that to be kind of a centric platform that enables them to both watch TV and or play games.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point. Yeah, again, I think that kind of ties back to kind of what we talked about on the show previously about how our kids have different expectations in terms of how they access entertainment. I think you gave the example of not being able to pause a TV show. So
yeah,
I mean, like, you're right. Like, we grew up with like 3 or 4 channels, and that was it. That's not the norm today, and so. Future generation of gamers may have different or may want to access gaming content differently than we do. So no, that's a great point, Hamp. I do want to move on to some other news. Oh man, Hamp, I tell you, man, have that 4090? Have you seen some of the benchmarks, man, for some of the games?
No, I haven't looked at them that closely yet.
Oh my god, dude! So I was talking to Delirium Blades, Brian Baker's in the live chat, and he was running like Battlefield at like ultra settings, 4K, like at 100 and something FPS, no DLSS. And he was just, I mean, he's like, it was incredible. I think the thing's just a monster. I've seen some of the other benchmarks, like with a Plague Tale Requiem at 4K, like at 180 something frames per second or something, no DLSS or anything. I mean, it's just, this thing's a beast. You know, man, I suffer from FOMO, right? I've been resisting the temptation, man. I've been resisting the temptation. I'm trying hard to resist the temptation. I don't think I'll get it there because I don't think my case is big enough to fit the 4090. I think it's too big.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So as we go through this, right? First of all, there's the matter that most games that are out now, most games that are going to be out soon, are games that can definitely be accommodated, right, by the 3000 series cards, right? And so, then there's always the matter of future proofing, but as it may be pertinent to you, but as you consider your next GPU upgrade, things like what you mentioned, right, are going to become maybe pertinent, maybe impediments. Does your case accommodate it? Do you need a retention or a support bar, like I needed my case for my 3080 Ti? And then power supplies and power connectors. All of those things are sometimes present the case to me that I want the new thing, but I'm not up for putting up with the pain in the butt that pulling all the supporting pieces together, might take. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I think those cards still need to kind of get out in the wild, and we need to see, what performances, after a couple of driver deliveries. It's still all pre-production right now, pre-release drivers, things like that. So, we'll see. Or I guess the 4090 the one that launched? I thought one was supposed to launch on October 12th, and so it might technically be, out in the wild.
That was the 4090 that launched, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I'm hard pressed to think of who that card is for. People like Dr. Disrespect, I guess, who supposedly pay $30,000 for their gaming PCs and then complain that there's nothing to play. Maybe, I don't know.
All right, that's funny, man. It's just some of the benchmarks have just been pretty impressive for this. But no, I mean, honestly, I'm okay with the 30 series. I'll be okay with the 30 series for quite some time. I mean, Plague Tale Requiem. I'm having no issues with that, with that game. But and by the way, I'm looking at the base model for my the current PC I have now. Had I waited till now to get this PC I have, I probably would have saved myself a couple $100. So, but anyhow, it is what it is. Yeah. You gotta go. I mean, it's always getting cheaper, and another better thing's always coming along. But you gotta go when you gotta go. Yeah, Slobo actually just got a 3080 Ti. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah. Slobo's incredibly intelligent. He knows PC hardware in and out. That's not the personal choice I would have made, but he knows what he's doing. So.
Yeah, no, he like I said, he's loving that card. So I don't know. Yeah, I thought about upgrading too because they've come down in price as well. But I don't know. I'm probably gonna hold off. But I don't know, man. Sometimes that FOMO kicks in.
Yeah, and he's a streamer too. So I mean, I haven't asked whether or not he's planning on. I know he talked for a little while about getting ready to set up a second PC so he'd have a dedicated streaming PC. So maybe this is when, that's that move. And anybody doing that, I always say, yeah, absolutely. Like if you're a live streamer, and you're going to set up a second PC that's a dedicated PC, absolutely. I don't have any issue. With people throwing money behind, current gen technology or superseded technology. because it's all about, delivering the best content that you possibly can from a quality perspective. And so it's worth the investment, for some people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's what he's doing too. I think he's using his other PCs for streaming, I think is what he's doing. But anyhow, all right. So we talked about Netflix. Let's see here. Silent Hill. Hamp, are you a Silent Hill fan?
I am not. Nope. I on board. What was the one that came out with the original Xbox?
Was that? I think it was Silent Hill 2.
Yeah. So I tried that game and spent like 30 minutes walking around, and I was out. That's like, okay, that's enough for me.
You're like, I'm done.
It's like the first original walking simulator. No, I get, and again, I say that without like trying to like throw shade at the game. I know that it's, the cup of tea for a lot of people. It's just it's not my interest area. I'm also not a super big survival horror fan. I had fun playing Outlast, but that's because it was very, pretty reasonably short experience. But in general, I'm just not somebody who chases the survival horror stuff.
Yeah. So Konami officially announced Silent Hill 2, the remake. It's going to be so this is interesting. It's coming exclusively to console exclusive to PlayStation 5. Will also be on PC. And we talked about this on BRAP about a year ago. That and for those who've listened to B Money on the show, that when B's talked about Sony in particular, that they were looking at Silent Hill is one of the games it mentioned. There's a Metal Gear Solid remake rumor out there, but Silent Hill is one of those games that was rumored to be that Sony was looking to remake, and so that's kind of been out there for a while, but now it's official. So look, I Silent Hill fan. I'm excited to see Silent Hill 2. I got excited when they finally showed off the trailer. I was excited to see it. The only pause of concern that I have is that Bloober Team is working on this. Their recent track record, the Medium, hasn't been great per se, but we'll see. They are working closely with the original creators, Akira Yamaoka, I think, and Masahiro Ito. And so we'll see. I'm not gonna poo-poo on the game and say it's not gonna be good. I just given Bloober Team's track record, I'm just that maybe kind of.
And I mean the Medium wasn't necessarily a banger, but it also wasn't that far down the spectrum. I mean, it was an enjoyable game that a lot of people liked. So, and I mean, definitely one. I mean, for me, if I were going to play it, would definitely be kind of in my band of like things that I look to play like out of a subscription service rather than picking them up individually. Yeah. But certainly was a title that a good chunk of people enjoyed.
Yeah. There was also another Silent Hill game. It was Silent Hill. Oh, what's it called now? Hold on a sec here.
Well, the thing I saw was like this whole notion of a Silent Hill shared universe, so to speak. But that their intention is not just to remake that one title, but to remake or to do a lot of properties kind of in this world and work with many more development teams. So the expectation is that this isn't necessarily just Konami, right, doing Silent Hill stuff, but them working with other development houses who want to, do stories based on that IP.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we saw. The live stream wrapped up with the one final announcement, and that was a new Silent Hill game called Silent Hill F. That's supposed to take place in Japan, and so that one actually, while I again was excited to see Silent Hill 2 remake announced, I think for me, Silent Hill F was really kind of really kind of got my attention. I'm like, I'm definitely really interested in this game, and That's actually being developed by Neobards Entertainment. And so, I'm actually looking forward to seeing more of that game and what that game's going to turn up to be like. But again, that was one of the other announcements that I thought was kind of that caught my attention. So
do we know whether or not the exclusivity is to? I mean, is it PlayStation exclusivity for the like this entire like franchise and all the titles that will be developed, or is it just specific to the Silent Hill 2 remake?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't seen anything, and if anyone in the live chat wants to chime in, I haven't seen anything that says that this is going to be that the franchise or reboot of this franchise is going to be exclusive to PlayStation 5. But I did read something that the Silent Hill 2 remake is exclusive, console exclusive for 12 months. So, but I haven't seen anything else about the other Silent Hill titles or projects. So, if someone in the live chat has any information on that, let me know. But Silent Hill 2 remake maybe, and I'm reading this right now. Silent Hill 2 remake may be a PlayStation exclusive for 12 months after it launches. The game will also be available on PC as well. So,
all of which is a little weird because I had the impression that there was this temporary gag order on the announcement of any more exclusives for the PlayStation platform in order to not get regulators all spooled up.
Well, there was that insider that made that claim that they weren't going to have an event, a showcase, delay the showcase because of the ongoing investigation of the Activision deal by the CMA. But here we are with a big franchise coming to PlayStation as a 1-year exclusive. I'm not buying that story. That's why they're holding off. I don't unless they're planning on announcing some major acquisition of a publisher or major studio, but I don't think that's the case. I don't. I'm not. I'm not buying that rumor.
Yeah, wasn't that the same insider that either incorrectly predicted that the thing that they did earlier or late in the summer was going to be the showcase, and that it wasn't going to kind of be because basically that event was overall kind of small, with the exception of the Ragnarok stuff at the end. But didn't she also predict that was going to be like a really big like show with like, tons of announcements and stuff in it that were really major?
I don't remember, man. I don't remember. And the other thing too with the CMA thing too, it isn't just about the exclusivity of COD. It's also, like we've talked about, that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about, unfortunately, is and even those folks who are talking about collusion and other bullshit conspiracy theories, is that it's they're also, and we've talked about this a lot, Hamp, they're looking at Microsoft leveraging their adjacencies and how that might impact competition in the gaming subscription and cloud gaming space in the future. So I'm not buying that rumor. I don't remember if that person made that prediction, but look, I mean, Sony's already announced exclusive content: Wolverine, Spider-Man 2. There's we know about KOTOR, which we don't know the state of that project right now. It could be in. We know that I forget the situation with KOTOR. Maybe the lead left or whatever it was. I forget. But
I mean, they're pushing the big redo button, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. They're pushing the redo button. So that's why I was kind of like, when I heard that rumor, like, well, so they already have exclusives announced. So like, I mean, like they're not going to announce exclusive because of the CMA thing again, unless it was something like where they're buying like Ubisoft or something, which I don't think that's happening. There's that rumor that they're kicking the tires of, CD Projekt Red, but I've heard that rumor for almost a year now.
And we've also heard that they were going to be acquired by Microsoft, was also a rumor.
Yeah, that too, yeah. So
and my whole thing, when those rumors spool up, is I can see where there might be desire for CD Projekt Red. Maybe like their development cycles are really long, I think, and so I don't. That's just a studio that I don't necessarily see why you'd want to wrap them into the platform owner kind of life cycle where you need a certain number of exclusive titles like per life cycle of a generation. But then the other thing is, but even when those rumors have come up, what I've said is I don't think any of them would want good old games though. Like that's just a business segment that I don't think necessarily helps either Sony or Microsoft. So, even if they were going to go after CD Projekt Red, I don't know what they would do.
Yeah, what would they do with that?
I don't know, man. Maybe try and sell it to GameStop. I think that's what I've said before. I think GameStop would benefit a lot more from a digital storefront, right? Although I thought maybe that was some of what they were supposed to be working on when they announced that partnership with Microsoft to prop up a lot of their infrastructure on Azure. But that could be interesting. But again, that would need. I mean, again, that storefront is only PC games, and their big claim to fame is no DRM. So I just don't know how that's hugely attractive to people putting out brand new games who always want DRM in their new games.
Yeah.
But that whole thing comes with the challenge of operating a digital storefront, which is really enhanced when you're a platform owner. Which I want to say somebody made claim that Microsoft was heading in that direction.
What's that? What was the claim again?
That Microsoft was working on a mobile app store.
Yeah, there was that Tom Warren article that hinted at that they were working on a mobile storefront to compete with Apple and Google. Yeah,
which is just a ludicrous claim that I don't think anybody actually, right, with any business acumen would actually make it would be the output of their analysis. Apple and Google can do what they do at scale because they own the platform, right? They get their 30% cut. I mean, to talk about opening up a mobile storefront that would have to inherently include apps that would go on to iOS and Android. I mean, first of all, you have a ridiculous revenue model that would be, Microsoft taking some percentage, and then the platform owner taking some percentage. So that would be problematic for anybody wanting to deploy their apps there. But just the claim by Warren to say that it's an app store to rival iOS and Android seems like a ludicrous claim to make. Unless Microsoft was also going to be a platform owner, and based on the interview that we read over on Stratechery, there's no way in the world that Microsoft is going down the path of trying to relaunch anything that's akin to Windows Phone. So, just the headlines and the soundbite that went along with that just seemed a little kind of ludicrous.
Yeah, so that's his. Okay, so his was Microsoft is building an Xbox mobile game store to take on Apple and Google. He's saying Microsoft's building an Xbox mobile store to directly offer games on mobile devices, challenging Apple and Google. The software giant first hinted at a next-generation store it would build for games earlier this year, but has now quietly revealed details of the plans and filings with the UK's competition and markets authority. So he's saying that this is coming from things that were in the filings of the CMA. So Microsoft is saying, hold on a sec here. In its filings, Microsoft says a big motivation for the purchase to help build out its mobile gaming presence. Its plans for this space apparently include creating an Xbox mobile gaming platform and store. Here's what the company says in the filings. The transaction will improve Microsoft's ability to create a next-generation game store which operates across a range of devices, including mobile, as a result of the addition of Activision Blizzard's content. Building on Activision Blizzard's existing communities of gamers, Xbox will seek to scale the Xbox store to mobile, attracting gamers to a new mobile platform. Shifting consumers away from the Google Play Store and Apple Store on mobile devices will, however, require a major shift in consumer behavior. Microsoft hopes that by offering well-known and popular content, gamers will be more inclined to try something new. So,
well, not even consumer behavior, but would have to change, right? A lot of the rulings that have come down, recently about, whether or not those stores are monopolies, right? When there's been some loosening of those tethers, but there certainly hasn't been any wholesale decoupling from the platform owner. And so, right, I mean, again, I can see the sanctity of the way Microsoft wrote it, but Warren's extrapolation that's going to mean that they're going to scale and compete at scale against iOS and Google, again, seems a little far-fetched.
Well, I mean, but isn't it like Game Pass? Isn't that what Game Pass is anyway? Like, you can buy games on Game Pass.
Yeah, yes. So it is minus the functionality of being able to purchase those games from your mobile device, which would, for a lot of people that's super convenient. For somebody who
but that's what I'm saying. Like the platform's there in Game Pass. You would just have to add the ability to buy the game on your, like, as you can on your console, but on mobile though.
Right, and when you do that, right, then they take a cut. Now, maybe Apple would back off of that since it would be done through the browser. So I mean that's possible. Since what they've claimed is that it's the utilization of that functionality through the App Store that they kind of maintain hegemony over. But but still, like I said, the problem. My problem with it is the scale that Warren says that it's going to achieve.
That's going to compete with Apple, and but I think he's getting that from. Let's see here. He's getting that from what Microsoft said about Google Play Store and the App Store on mobile devices. I think that's because they actually mentioned that attracting gamers to the new Xbox mobile platform, shifting consumers away from the Google Play Store and App Store mobile devices will, however, require major shifts. So yeah, he's saying like, hey, they want to compete with those stores with Xbox, whatever the Xbox mobile platform is.
Yeah, offer differentiation I can understand, but again, my problem is with Warren's characterization of it was rival, right? Which just has a different connotation to it. It makes it sound like it's head-to-head competition at scale, in a way that actually pulls away significantly from their revenue base, and that I just don't foresee happening.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm seeing if there's anything else in this article. Hold on a sec here. He's saying, oh yeah, he does mention building a successful rival to Google Play. Yeah, I think this is a play for Game Pass. I think that's what that is. When I hear Xbox mobile platform, I think of Game Pass.
Right. Now, I mean,
I don't think anything like Google Play, like the Google Play Store or the App Store. Like that's not how I envision an Xbox mobile, whatever he's calling this. I go back to Game Pass being on mobile devices, and like we talked about this, like the impact that Game Pass on a mobile device could have in those countries that where, like you said, like they don't have the infrastructure, the IT, I almost said IT infrastructure, the internet infrastructure, and they're solely relying on their phones to communicate and browse things like that, because that's what like I forget what countries you mentioned this in, but I think that's the play for them with an Xbox mobile type application or whatever.
Yeah, and the way it could be done, well, you still wouldn't be able to do it with it. I mean, and these things haven't really taken off or been successful, but I guess arguably you could partner with a lot of mobile device or mobile device like vendors and manufacturers and kind of cobble together partnerships, right? Like you could have something built by TSMC or I should say, or Foxconn or some type of ODM branded as Xbox. You could utilize AOSP, so you wouldn't cut across the licensing deals that have to be made with official, Google licensing. And you could build basically an Xbox mobile device, which would cover you for Wi-Fi. I don't know how they would move to get cellular, because I just don't know that Verizon or AT&T would put a device or offer sell-through of a device, on their networks that didn't have official Google branding. So, I mean, there are ways you could go about it. All those things seem fraught with a good deal of risk. I mean, this would be a big move that, again, I wouldn't necessarily predict would unfold, but maybe they could go kind of the Google Fi route, right? And offer, kind of, AOSP backed devices that had cellular connectivity through a Microsoft branded MVNO. But again, all that's a lot of moving parts that don't offer a great deal of simplification for consumers and become highly dependent upon, other deals and structures and aren't as straightforward as, doing something where they wholly own the technology stack. So I don't know, we'll have to see, I guess.
Yeah. And I don't think, to your point, I don't think Microsoft's interested in building another platform. I think that's kind of counterintuitive to what they're trying to do in terms of, taking their services to whatever the clients, or I say clients, customers are at.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily interested in building another Xbox, but they have shown interest in building smaller scale devices, like the rumored like streaming puck or streaming thumbstick or whatever that fits in your TV and things of that nature. So this could maybe complement like that kind of a portfolio, a kind of a small scale device. But again, my skepticism over that is it needs a lot of moving parts to go along with it. So, but I just don't know. But again, Satya throwing them dollar bills around. So let us compete. Let's have competition.
Yes, let's. That's my favorite line of by a CEO in years. But that was an interesting article about that you shared with me about Microsoft when Satya came in 2014 and him kind of shifting the culture there at Microsoft and taking them from being so reliant on Windows to hey, you know what, we're going to bring our products to the customers and where the customers are at, and that was a big shift from the Ballmer Bill Gates days at Microsoft. So and it's in reading that article, actually, even though I knew kind of the purpose of Game Pass and that and Game Pass kind of coming about as Microsoft has kind of shifted its focus, but that article really kind of just, for me at least, I took away having more insight into the motivation behind Satya's involvement with Game Pass. And we talked about him saying, if it's about competition, let's have competition. He's all in with taking Microsoft products to the consumers, wherever the consumers are at. That's where we need to be. And that is very much what Game Pass is. And actually, that again, as much as people say that I am biased against Xbox, I'm actually, I like the moves that Microsoft's making in the gaming space, especially with Game Pass. Getting a library of content to consumers. To consumers who have to whatever devices they already own. I don't see how that's a bad thing, in my opinion. So,
yeah, and it's interesting as we kind of dig into seeing how Satya is doing things. You go back to 2012, right, when Steven Sinofsky left Microsoft, who was rumored to kind of be the most favored person and the CEO in waiting. And you think about, right, the discussions that led to him not being the successor to Steve Ballmer and Satya being picked, right, and the thought process that had to go in, rather than pick the guy who's leading Windows, right, pick the guy who's leading Azure and their cloud initiatives. That's a huge fork in the road for a corporation like that to take. And so, we'd be dealing with a very, very super different Microsoft, right, if Sinofsky had succeeded to the throne. And I don't know, quite honestly, that we would even have an Xbox, right, if Sinofsky had been in charge. And Xbox definitely went through its own challenge with Satya, right, kind of trying to evaluate how that division synergized with, right, Microsoft's new strategy. So it's just kind of interesting to see how these things unfold. And then, and Satya is a guy who, he doesn't show up, right? I mean, I think I'm becoming like very, keen and aware on where he does show up, because he doesn't feel obligated to show up, right, for a lot of these things. He has people who are in charge of these things. He doesn't show up to the Surface event, right? He doesn't. It's really typically never publicly talked a lot about Xbox other than that interview, right? He's done interviews, right, which were in private venues and where there's quotes and stuff from. But as far as being on camera and kind of talking about their strategy, he hasn't done that a ton outside of earnings calls. So I think it's very telling to me just how all in they are on the Xbox strategy, right? When Satya is making those things. And again, does that interview and speaks to that, but I mean, I say it jokingly, but I can't be bothered to get off the couch, right, to go to their Surface event, and shows up, for Meta, right, but like I said, can't be bothered for other stuff. So, it's just interesting to kind of see the history unfold. And
the Meta thing he showed up for, because I think again, it's that play of we're going, and he said we're going to bring, our what do you say, 365 other other Microsoft products to VR, because we want people to be able to access those. We want to be where we want to be in those spaces where people are, where they can have access to our products, but they don't have to come to us. And that's Game Pass.
Yeah, Zuck is talking about how VR for them is a big enterprise play, and you don't make a big enterprise play and not bring Microsoft along with you. I would think.
That, yeah.
So and everybody's waiting in the wings for Apple to drop its AR device, which is supposedly going to have, I want to say I heard 14 cameras or whatever. So, this is an opportunity for Microsoft to get in the pool kind of first, with a partner, right, rather than kind of sit and wait, as kind of the whole tech industry did, right, for things like the iPhone and the iPad. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do want to get to one more topic here, Hamp, and this is Call of Duty. So some other things have come about related to the CMA. Microsoft's recently published response to the CMA, and one of the things that was reported on by VGC. Let's see. COD may not appear on Game Pass for a number of years due to a prior Activision Sony deal. Microsoft has claimed it's bound by prior agreements to keep COD off the service. So this is from a footnote that references a tweet from Phil Spencer, alluding to prior agreements between Activision and Sony, which would prohibit Microsoft from adding Call of Duty to Game Pass. And in quotes, the agreement between Activision Blizzard and Sony includes restrictions on the ability of Activision Blizzard to place Call of Duty titles on Game Pass for a number of years. This is what the footnote reads. So, Hamp, I think, maybe I know we talked about, Jim Ryan, and him kind of, maybe it was his comment like, hey, I thought this was behind the. What was the comment with Jim Ryan? So like, hey, they're not, the deal they're giving us isn't good or something, and nobody knew what that meant. I mean,
he opened that thread by saying, I wasn't going to make a mention on a conversation that I thought was a private business conversation between two companies.
Yes, exactly.
However, since Phil spoke on it, let me throw my salt up here as well. And then he said, he talked about, the arrangement that was being offered and said that that was kind of in no way compensating for, what PlayStation gamers wanted. So let me first say, I'm still going to cast doubt on the VGC article, just in their interpretation of it. Just at least doubt in as much as I'm still confused and don't feel like this has necessarily been corroborated. So they talk about this footnote that points to a tweet. The tweet doesn't say anything about the marketing deal, and it doesn't say anything suggesting that there are agreements that definitively involve, codification of anything to keep COD off of Game Pass. The tweet says, had good calls this week with leaders at Sony. I confirmed our intent to honor all existing agreements upon acquisition of Activision Blizzard and our desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony is an important part of our industry, and we value our relationship. So that tweet doesn't say anything about not putting it in Game Pass. That being said, again, I've felt that it was very, a huge assumption and a lot of conjecture to assume that it was going immediately to Game Pass. It seemed far more logical to me that move wouldn't happen until the marketing agreement had expired, which would expire, after the release of the 2025 Call of Duty title, and that thereafter we might see some movement in that direction. So to me, none of this is necessarily wholeheartedly strange or a big, huge curveball. But I also don't feel that it's necessarily like been nailed down, right, as fact. It's still kind of veiled behind a lot of corporate speak that may or may not mean, what people think it means.
Yeah, it's gonna be, and I wonder if that is, the deal to keep it off Game Pass, if that's in place, if that is in fact what the negotiating is about, the back and forth between Sony and Microsoft. Who knows? Maybe that's it. But yeah, it's interesting. Like the article does say that this is a footnote in the response to the CMA. But if you go back to that tweet, Phil does. I don't see anything either where Phil specifically mentions a deal or something like that about the game not going to Game Pass.
Right. So I don't think it specifically calls it out. That being said, it wouldn't strike me as strange. Again, kind of like you and I talked earlier this week, right? Where we make the argument that, acquiring Call of Duty, and because I don't think that the argument is a lot about simply the acquisition of Call of Duty. It's the acquisition of Call of Duty and putting it in Game Pass. And part of my question is, well, Microsoft could put Call of Duty in Game Pass now. There's nothing, right, from a regulation standpoint that says that couldn't happen. It's just that they haven't come to that agreement with Activision. They don't have to own Call of Duty in order to do that. They put tons of stuff in Game Pass without owning, right, the publisher or the developer. There's no reason why there couldn't be an Activision play, right, in the same way that there is an EA play, that's concurrent with your Game Pass subscription. Other than they haven't made that arrangement and they haven't backed a truckload of cash big enough up to the Activision loading dock. Now, one thing that could be preventing it is, as you just mentioned, right, if there is some clause in a marketing deal that prevents Activision from accepting that type of arrangement, due to the written into the co-marketing deal for Call of Duty, or at least the most recent version of it, since that one would have been penned after the launch of Game Pass.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. Again, that's just. Again, I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking that maybe is the fuss behind the back and forth, that maybe that in fact is the case here. Again, we don't know 100% sure. It's interesting. Like I went back, read that article again, and then read the tweets, and I'm not seeing it either. Like you mentioned, Ham. So I don't know, man. But again, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But one thing I want to note, Ham, I've seen a lot of stuff. Around like if this deal doesn't go through, and I've never seen a situation where people care so much about whether a deal comes through. Like somebody had asked me, like, what do you think if the deal goes through? And I'm like, I don't think anything, because I'm still going to play Call of Duty. Like I don't, like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not sure why a lot of people are putting emotion to this particular deal. I don't know, man. It's not a big deal to me. Like if it goes to Game Pass, or Microsoft gets the Activision deal, okay, cool. I'm still going to play Call of Duty. I'm still going to play it on PC. I'll get it through Game Pass on PC, but it's like, there's no impact to me per se. And I don't understand some of the stuff I'm seeing where people are saying things like, oh, if the deal doesn't go through, Xbox should just, outbid and outmoney hat PlayStation. It's like as if Microsoft should exact some revenge for the deal not going through. And I've also seen people say it's Sony blocking the deal, and it's not Sony blocking the deal. It would be the CMA in this case that would block the deal, not necessarily Sony. So just some observations, some weird things that I've been seeing about this deal.
Yeah, well, maybe the next thing we'll see is we'll see Satya say, "I'm going to go thermonuclear" on Sony.
If Satya said that, I would actually laugh. That'd be because actually Steve Jobs did say that about Android.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's again just a quick update on the some news coming about the CMA investigation or some of the footnotes related to Microsoft's response to the CMA. So, Capoto's he's like, I wonder if Microsoft is getting aggravated at Sony. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think, Camp?
I mean, sure, yes, but again, I don't know. I don't ascribe the emotion to it as that. Interesting. I've got some things going on now, right, with a subcontractor with us, and sure, I get aggravated about what I say to be done not getting done, but those things aren't personal. So yes, there's some emotion to it, but I guess maybe I'd call it business emotion, which is different than like real world emotion. So I would say, at a certain point in the conduct of this M&A, right, depending on which way different regulatory bodies go, right, at a certain point, something's going to get old for either party, right? If a ton of regulatory agencies start falling on the side of approving the M&A, then at a certain point, right, Microsoft's patience and tolerance for constant arguments in the opposite direction, they're going to get kind of fed up, right? And I guess again trying to feel and talk my way through the analogy, right? In the case of my own dealings, right? Today the thing I said was like, look, I get it. People don't like to change, but my tolerance for being concerned about people's feelings being hurt is kind of very short, right? And so that might be right pertinent, right, to the situation, but kind of like you said, but I think that falls short of kind of right the thing you were just joking about, right, which is people getting angry and shaking fists and looking to seek revenge. I think it's just a matter of hey, I got X number of cycles in a day to handle problems, and I don't have 99 of those to put on the M&A and trying to push back against the Sony arguments that are being fielded.
Yeah, I just think it's weird, man. Like the emotion that's poured into this acquisition, and it's like that's why I can't wait for it to be over with, because it's like the stuff that I've been seeing, like I mean, crying out loud, like corruption, I don't know, man. It just,
yeah. I would imagine within the halls of Microsoft, right, that also there's a conversation that starts to talk about conservation of resources and conservation of level of effort, right? That, hey, while this is going on, we still have 23 studios to run, right? In a subscription service we're trying to get off the ground or kind of move forward, right? And a bunch of studios that have to produce content, right? So at a certain point, I'm sure that there's a conversation that says, hey, the M&A is going to do what the M&A is going to do. The resources that we've assigned to it are going to build the arguments and the cases. But at a certain point, right, everybody's got to leave dry dock, right, and start focusing on keeping the rest of the business running. And if the M&A doesn't go through, it doesn't go through. I'm absolutely certain that there's a strategy, right, that talks about, everything that needs to happen if it doesn't go through. And at a certain point, as this thing evolves, what you start saying is, keep working as if the M&A is not going to happen, right? Start lining the things up. And if the opportunity, right, this goes back to kind of risk management, right? And kind of, how we're taught to handle things from a program management, project management, P&L management perspective. You don't bank, right, the futures on the things that might come, right? You bank and double down on the things that are realities that you can count on and that are deterministic. And so, at a certain point, like I said, some of the gray matter and some of the brain trust is going to be pointed in that direction, and not on spending time, right, on the M&A. So, we'll just have to kind of see how that unfolds and goes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, I'm looking at a picture of the GTX the RTX 4090 next to. Is this a 3090?
I thought you were going to say next to the Xbox Series S.
No, dude. I mean, Jesus, man. The heat sink on this thing is fucking, excuse my language, huge. This GPU is ginormous.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, there's a certain threshold at which, capability scales to a point of like, I don't want to be bothered. Right. And like the whole thing about like the 4 power connectors and the I think, what is it, the 12-pin adapter and all those things. What I often coach people to is, when building a PC, let's say you're building a PC from the ground up, right? And you're going to spend, I don't know, $1,500 on it, right? I always recommend have another $500 budgeted, right? So that when you get your $1,500 of parts and you find out you've forgotten something or something goes awry or you didn't think about an integration point and you have to order extra parts, sometimes even if you have to replace a part, right? What I say is, look, have an extra amount of money, right, identified so that, you can, if you suspect a GPU is bad, you can order a new GPU. You don't have to wait and go through the RMA process and ship the thing back to Amazon and wait for your money to be refunded and yada, yada, yada. Same thing with this, right? And even with the PC that I just built earlier this fall, right? What the heck is that PC built on? I think this is that I built on the 5950X, right? And I think the X570 chipset from AMD, right? There were integration points that I screwed up, right? That I didn't realize that that the NVMe drives had to be PCIe 4, right? And so I bought parts, but I fortunately, because I always budget having a little extra money left over, I had to order new NVMe drives, right? So, like I said, but that also causes me to think about uncertainty, right? And because some things, as much as you try and research, you just don't actually know until the parts show up. The 4090 just makes me sketchy enough that I wouldn't even think about trying to integrate that into one of my systems because of all the questions that it raises until the thing's been out on the street longer or, I find that there's some reason why I shouldn't be satisfied with the 4080.
Yeah. Well, look, Hamp, we are at 10:40. We have wrapped up all the topics this evening, but I want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you all for coming by and hanging out with us this evening. If you're new, please consider subscribing. Hit the bell notifications so you're alerted when we go live. And please smash that like button. And feel free to leave comments in the comment section below. So on that note, I want to give a big shout out to B Money, Slow-Mo Backslap, and Game Forte. Couldn't make it this evening. Big shout out to those gentlemen. And Hamp, if you want to be found, sir, let everyone know they can find you.
So you can also see me, hear me Sunday nights at about 8:45 p.m. Eastern on the E2KG Network podcasting channel, on the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast over there. You can also, and I would say count this with a bit of hope, you can also see me or hear me every couple of weeks on a new podcast that I've started called The Infinity Panel, where I will be inviting various personalities around gamer Twitter and the YouTube verse on to talk about games, just in kind of a somewhat regular type of agenda and some level-headed approaches to conversation, asking people to kind of leave their brands at the door and just kind of come in to talk about games and industry news, but again, without a hyper focus on, the drama or, whatever is the big gauntlet that people are throwing down that particular week. So we had the inaugural episode of that last Saturday. It is posted on my personal YouTube channel, Rounding Off Infinity. So you can go see that over there. And hopefully, like I said, there will be episodes once every 2 weeks. So we had the inaugural episode, and I've tentatively lined up guests for episode number 2. So looking to record that weekend after next.
Absolutely, man. So, definitely check out Hamp. And again, everyone, thank you for hanging out with us this evening. And there may be another BRAP rant at some point, maybe later the week. But I will let you know. Give me a follow on Twitter at BRAP_podcast for all the latest updates as relates to the podcast and other stuff that I talk about. So, On that note, we're out. Everyone, have a great rest of the evening. I'm going to go play some video games and see if my my memory boost helps. So we'll see. But no, thank you everyone for stopping by. We'll catch you next time.